Kevin, a retired Navy SEAL, had been living a peaceful life in the secluded Rocky Mountains. But that tranquility shattered when a spacecraft crashed near his home, carrying two exiled alien princesses, Murloc and Zephyr. The Lemnorian Empire, an advanced civilization obsessed with conquering lesser worlds, had banished the sisters to Earth. Their tyrannical father, Emperor Zorgon, sought to punish them for a failed coup, but in doing so, he unknowingly gave humanity its only chance at survival. As Kevin brought the unconscious aliens into his cabin, he had no idea that their arrival would change the course of human history. Earth's resources and population were ripe for Lemnorian enslavement and exploitation. Only Murloc and Zephyr, now disillusioned with their brutal empire, could prevent the coming invasion. And as the princesses revealed the direness of the situation, Kevin knew he had to help them, even as a forbidden attraction grew. He was humanity's sole hope, working with unlikely alien allies. The countdown to Earth's Judgment Day had begun, and failure meant the end of human freedom. Together, this man and these alien women would have to do the impossible and fight to save a planet that was not their own. The battle for Earth was about to begin. As the blue-skinned fist pounded on the cabin door, Kevin grabbed his pistol. He cracked the door, ready to fire, but he saw it was just Murloc, not some assassin. The princess pushed past him. "We intercepted a transmission. Lemnorian scouts in orbit." "Shit, what are they doing?" Zephyr slipped inside too. "Preparing an invasion. They want to land forces in the Siberian wilderness, build a staging ground for conquering Earth." Kevin holstered his gun. This was bad. He had to warn someone, but who? Then it hit him, his old commander. "I need to call Admiral Hawkins. He commands the U.S. Pacific Fleet. He can help." Kevin dialed the Admiral's private line. At first, Hawkins was skeptical. He thought Kevin might have gone crazy alone in the mountains. But Kevin put Murloc on, and she convinced him. Hawkins agreed to an urgent meeting at a classified base in Colorado. They flew to the facility on a military transport, flanked by F-35 escorts. In the briefing room, Murloc laid out what she knew of Lemnorian tactics and tech. She highlighted the weaknesses in their ship designs and the gaps in their formations. The Joint Chiefs were impressed. As the meeting ended, alarms rang out. A thin alien in a stealth suit shimmered into view, lunging at Murloc with an energy blade. Kevin reacted instantly, shoving the princess aside and firing. His shots ripped through the assassin's armor, but didn't drop him. The Lemnorian slashed with his sword, and Kevin barely dodged. Zephyr grabbed a pistol from a guard and opened up on the assassin. Bullets and plasma bolts flew across the room as the humans and Lemnorians exchanged fire. The assassin slipped out in the chaos, trailing blood. "Then the invasion is coming," Hawkins growled. "This assassin proves how serious this is. I'll put every fleet on high alert. We'll fortify Siberia and watch the skies." Meanwhile, Emperor Zorgon seethed with rage as he learned of his daughter's betrayal. He had thought marooning them on Earth would keep them out of the way. Instead, they were helping the humans resist. He screamed for his forces to attack immediately. Forget building up a beachhead. They would begin the planetary bombardment now. Lemnorian warships blinked into existence in high orbit. Their advanced cloaking let them arrive unseen by Earth's defenses. From space, they could rain plasma fire on the human cities, wiping out billions in hours. But not if Kevin could help it. He gathered with Murloc, Zephyr, and the human leadership in a secure bunker. They pored over Lemnorian technical readouts, searching for any weakness to exploit. The fate of the world hung in the balance. In the meantime, Murloc pulled Kevin aside. "I didn't thank you for saving me back there." "Of course, we're in this together," Kevin said. "This isn't just Earth's fight, it's yours now too." Their eyes met, and a spark passed between them. The threat of annihilation was bringing them closer than ever. They both knew the odds were against them, but they had to try, for each other and the planet. The battle to come would decide everything. The Lemnorian dropships punched through the atmosphere, anti-air bursting around them. But the aliens' shields held as they descended on the Siberian taiga. Snow-covered pines shook as the ship's thrusters flared, melting the frost. Armored doors whooshed open, and Lemnorian shock troops poured out, plasma rifles crackling. Their grey metal armor made them look like robots, with only their hate-filled eyes visible. The Russians had scrambled their tanks and infantry to meet the alien threat, but they were no match for the Lemnorians' advanced weaponry. Blue plasma bolts cut through the Russian armor like tissue paper. Soldiers screamed as the superheated gas boiled them alive in their vehicles. Lemnorian hover tanks darted between the trees, their twin plasma cannons incinerating everything in their path. And at the center of the chaos, a massive Lemnorian command ship disgorged prefabricated base modules. Robotic drones swarmed over the structures, rapidly assembling them into a fortified compound. In minutes, a bristling stronghold rose from the snow, its plasma turrets already swiveling to target the beleaguered Russians. The Lemnorian beachhead was established, and the enemy advance had begun. News of the devastating defeat in Siberia spread like wildfire. People around the globe watched in horror as videos of the one-sided battle played on every screen. Panic gripped the world as the terrible realization set in. Humanity was under attack by a vastly superior foe. Riots erupted as terrified mobs stormed stores and government buildings. Anarchy reigned in the streets. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, the emergency session was in full swing. Delegates shouted over each other, some calling for immediate retaliation, others insisting they should try to negotiate. The Secretary-General banged his gavel, desperately trying to restore order. Into this chaos strode Kevin, Murloc, and Zephyr. Kevin muscled his way to the podium. "People of Earth, I know you're afraid, but we don't have to face this threat alone. These brave Lemnorian women have inside knowledge of the enemy. With their help, we can fight back." Murloc stepped forward, her voice ringing out. "The Lemnorian Empire is a cancer on the galaxy. My sister and I learned that the hard way, but now we're here to make sure they can't subjugate your planet like they did so many others. You must stand united as one world against the coming darkness." Suddenly, plasma bolts streaked through the chamber. Lemnorian infiltrators, disguised as human delegates, had opened fire on the assembled world leaders. Bodyguards rushed forward, but the assassins' advanced stealth suits made them almost impossible to hit. Kevin dove for the U.S. president, tackling him to the ground as a plasma bolt sizzled overhead. Zephyr grabbed a fallen guard's pistol and started shooting, her aim preternaturally accurate. But Murloc charged straight at the assassins, heedless of the danger. She crashed into one, slamming him to the floor. They grappled, plasma flashing between them. With a burst of desperate strength, Murloc snapped the assassin's neck. But as she staggered to her feet, another Lemnorian appeared behind her. He fired point-blank and Murloc crumpled as the bolt took her in the back. She had thrown herself in front of the U.S. president at the last second, saving him from certain death. The last assassin fell to Zephyr's marksmanship, and an eerie silence descended. Kevin rushed to Murloc's side, cradling her charred body. She was horribly burned, but miraculously still breathing. Medics sprinted in with a stretcher, and Kevin helped load her on. Tears streamed down his face as they carried Murloc away, her fate uncertain. In the following days, a grim Kevin and a distraught Zephyr threw themselves into the war effort. They worked around the clock with Earth's best and brightest in a desperate attempt to close the technology gap. Lemnorian weapons and equipment captured from the Siberian battle were taken apart, analyzed, and reverse-engineered. Under their guidance, human scientists made astonishing breakthroughs. In hidden research facilities, prototype energy shields and plasma cannons took shape. Elite troops began training with the new tech, preparing for the inevitable clash with the alien invaders. And as the fledgling Earth Defense Force came together, grim news came from the front. The Lemnorians were on the move, surging out from their Siberian stronghold. The EDF prepared to launch a desperate counterattack, even as more reports of alien landings came flooding in. It seemed nowhere on Earth was safe. Admiral Hawkins grimaced as he surveyed the tactical map. Red icons indicating Lemnorian ships were winking into existence in orbit. "They're here," he said heavily. "The main invasion fleet. God help us all." The first plasma blasts struck the EDF command bunker, shaking it to its foundations. Monstrous energies, visible from space, were being unleashed on Earth's major cities. The Lemnorian bombardment had begun, and the world was burning under the onslaught. The battle for Earth had begun in earnest, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Lemnorian warships hung in orbit like avenging angels, raining plasma death onto the Earth below. Cities burned under the onslaught, skyscrapers toppling and highways melting. But even as the bombardment continued unabated, the newly formed Earth Defense Force refused to submit. In a remote corner of Siberia, Kevin Robinson crouched in the blood-stained snow, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Around him, the elite EDF soldiers he had hand-picked and trained checked their weapons one last time. They clutched rifles that fired searing plasma bolts and wore armor that had been painstakingly reverse-engineered from captured Lemnorian technology. Kevin stood, his eyes hard as flint. "All right, listen up," he barked. "That Lemnorian base is the key to their whole invasion. We take it out, we buy Earth some breathing room, we fail, and our cities keep burning. So failure is not an fucking option." The soldiers nodded grimly, their faces set with determination. Kevin had drilled them mercilessly, pushing them past the breaking point again and again. They were the best of the best, and they would not fail. "Stick to the plan," Kevin continued. "Alpha Team hits the perimeter defenses. Bravo punches through to the command center. Delta covers the flank. Remember your training, watch your buddies back, and we all come home alive." The soldiers erupted into a battle cry and surged forward, plasma rifles held at the ready. The Lemnorian base loomed ahead, all gleaming metal and bristling gun emplacements. Kevin charged with his troops, his heart pounding in his ears. This was it. Do or die, for Earth, for Murloc, for the whole damn human race. The first plasma bolt stitched the snow around them as the Lemnorians opened up. EDF soldiers fell, armor smoldering, blood steaming in the cold. But Kevin and the survivors pushed forward, grenades and plasma fire shredding alien bodies. They hit the outer wall in a rush, breaching charges blowing holes in the reinforced metal. Kevin dove through, rolling and coming up firing. A Lemnorian trooper loomed over him, swinging an energy glaive. Kevin ducked the blow and buried his combat knife in the alien's throat, hot blood spraying. All around him, EDF soldiers grappled with the Lemnorians in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Plasma bolts flew thick and fast, searing flesh and melting armor. The snow turned to mud and then to glass beneath the heat of the battle. Kevin fought like a man possessed, his rifle bucking in his hands, spent power cells pinging off his armor. Slowly, painfully, they pushed deeper into the base, leaving a trail of mangled corpses in their wake. At the heart of the compound, they found the command center, a fortified bunker bristling with gun turrets. Bravo Team hit it with everything they had, rockets and plasma charges blowing chunks of smoldering metal into the sky. Kevin and his hand-picked breach team stacked up at the shattered door. At his signal, they stormed inside, shots already firing. The command center was a charnel house of shattered equipment and butchered Lemnorians. At its center stood a towering hologram, a flickering image of Emperor Zorgon himself. The hologram sneered down at Kevin, even as the EDF soldiers shot it to pieces. "Foolish primates," the Emperor's image crackled. "You only delay the inevitable. Earth will fall, and your precious princesses will watch you burn." With a final burst of plasma fire, the hologram vanished and the bunker fell silent. Kevin sagged against a shattered console, his armor battered and blood-stained. They had done it. The base was theirs. But at what cost? Suddenly a flashing light caught Kevin's eye. He reached out and grabbed a strange Lemnorian device from the wreckage. It pulsed in his hand, glowing with alien script. A communicator of some kind, and it was receiving a signal from high orbit, from the Emperor's flagship itself. Miles away in a secure EDF medical facility, Murloc's eyes fluttered open. She sat up slowly, marveling at her body's swift recovery. The human doctors had done their work well. Too well, perhaps. Murloc could feel a strange new energy thrumming through her veins, a tingling power she had never known before. Murloc rolled out of bed, her hospital gown falling away. She stretched out a hand, and her armor leaped from the locker to encase her body. The doctors scrambled back in shock and awe as Murloc strode forward, a fierce grin on her face. She knew what she had to do. It was time to take the fight to the Emperor himself. Time to end this invasion once and for all, and with Kevin and Zephyr at her side, she knew they could do it. The final battle was about to begin. As Murloc marched through the halls, alarms blared and soldiers scrambled. Overhead the sky burned with fire as the EDF fleet clashed with the Lemnorian armada in a titanic space battle. The very heavens shook with the fury of their struggle. In the chaos, a sleek EDF shuttle rocketed up from the planet's surface, carrying a strike team clad in midnight black stealth armor. At its head stood Kevin, Murloc, and Zephyr, their faces grim and determined. Using the stolen codes from the captured communicator, they slipped past the Lemnorian picket ships and made for the Emperor's massive flagship. Its hull bristled with weapons, its armor thick enough to shrug off nuclear blasts. But the EDF team had a few tricks up their sleeve. Their armor, reverse-engineered from Lemnorian tech, bent light and radiation around them, rendering them all but invisible. They ghosted through the flagship's defenses like wraiths, undetected and unstoppable. Once inside, though, all hell broke loose. Alarms wailed and blast doors slammed shut as the Lemnorians rallied to repel the boarders. Kevin and his team fought like demons, plasma bolts and razor-sharp blades flashing in the gloom. Corridor by corridor, deck by deck, they pushed deeper into the flagship, leaving a trail of mangled alien corpses in their wake. Murloc and Zephyr fought side by side, their movements fluid and graceful, their powers magnified by the bond they shared. At last, they breached the doors to the Emperor's command chamber. The room was vast and vaulted, dominated by a huge view screen that showed the raging battle outside. And there, seated on a throne of twisted metal, was Emperor Zorgon himself. Murloc stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "We dare because it's right, because the Lemnorian Empire is a cancer on the galaxy, and it needs to be cut out. And we're the scalpel." Zorgon threw back his head and laughed, a sound like the grinding of metal on bone. "You have no idea what you're facing. Earth is just the beginning, an aperitif before the main feast. My scouts are already seeding a dozen worlds, preparing them for conquest. The galaxy will be mine." Kevin raised his rifle, his face a mask of grim resolve. "Not if we have anything to say about it," he growled. And with that, he opened fire, plasma bolts stitching the air. The final confrontation had begun, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Emperor Zorgon's eyes blazed with malice as he sneered at Kevin and Murloc. "Fools, you think you've won? The Star Crusher is already on its way. Earth will be reduced to ashes, a fitting punishment for your defiance." Kevin's heart pounded in his chest. He leveled his plasma rifle at the Emperor. "We won't let that happen. We'll stop the Star Crusher no matter what it takes." Murloc stepped forward, her fists clenched. "Your reign of terror ends here, Father. The Lemnorian Empire will never conquer another world." Zorgon threw back his head and laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You underestimate my power, daughter, and the power of the Star Crusher. It is unstoppable." With a roar of fury, the Emperor launched himself at Kevin and Murloc, his energy blade flashing. Kevin fired, plasma bolts sizzling through the air, but Zorgon deflected them with his blade, moving with inhuman speed. Murloc leaped to meet him, her own energy blade springing to life. Father and daughter clashed in a whirlwind of strikes, blades sparking and flashing. Kevin circled, looking for an opening, but Zorgon was too fast, too skilled. Suddenly the ship shuddered violently. Warning klaxons blared and the lights flickered. On the view screen, a massive, menacing shape emerged from hyperspace. The Star Crusher had arrived. "Behold," Zorgon crowed, "the instrument of Earth's destruction." The Star Crusher was a behemoth, dwarfing even the Emperor's flagship. Its hull was a patchwork of jagged metal and pulsing energy conduits. At its heart, a swirling vortex of dark energy pulsed, ready to be unleashed. As the Star Crusher entered Earth's orbit, the planet below began to quake. Massive tsunamis surged across the oceans, and the ground split open, spewing lava and ash. The very fabric of the world was coming apart. In the flagship's depths, Zephyr and the EDF commandos fought their way to the engineering deck. They blasted through the Lemnorian defenses, leaving a trail of smoking wreckage in their wake. "We have to disable the ship's power core," Zephyr shouted over the din of battle. "It's the only way to stop the Star Crusher." Back in the Emperor's chamber, Kevin and Murloc fought with renewed desperation. They could feel the seconds ticking away, Earth's fate hanging by a thread. Murloc reached out with her mind, her telepathic bond with Kevin surging to life. Together, she thought, as one. Kevin felt Murloc's presence in his mind, her strength flowing into him. They moved as a single entity, their attacks perfectly synchronized. Zorgon faltered under their onslaught, his defenses crumbling. With a final desperate lunge, Kevin and Murloc drove their blades into the Emperor's chest. Zorgon staggered back, black blood spurting from the wound. At that moment, a brilliant flash lit up the view screen. The flagship's power core detonated in a blinding explosion, sending shockwaves through the ship. On the screen, the Star Crusher shuddered, its dark energy vortex flickering and dying. Zephyr's voice crackled over the comm. "The core is destroyed, but the feedback loop, it's tearing the ship apart. We have to go now." Kevin and Murloc sprinted for the escape pods, the ship buckling and tearing around them. They dove into a pod just as a wall of fire consumed the Emperor's chamber, Zorgon's final scream echoing in their ears. From the pod's viewport, they watched in awe and horror as Zephyr piloted the crippled flagship on a collision course with the Star Crusher. The two titanic vessels met in a cataclysmic explosion, a miniature sun blooming in the void. "Zephyr," Murloc whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She sacrificed herself for all of us." As the shockwave from the explosion raced outwards, the Lemnorian fleet broke and scattered. EDF ships surged forward, plasma cannons blazing, driving the invaders back from Earth's orbit. In the escape pod, Kevin held Murloc close, their hearts heavy with grief and triumph. They had won, but at a terrible cost. Earth was safe, but the scars of the invasion would linger for generations. And out among the stars, the remnants of the Lemnorian fleet limped away leaderless and broken. But in the depths of space, a new threat stirred, drawn by the conflict and the promise of fresh conquest. The war for Earth was over, but the battle for the galaxy had only just begun. As the escape pod tumbled through the void, Kevin clung to Murloc, his mind reeling from the cataclysmic events they had just witnessed. The Star Crusher, the Emperor's flagship, Zephyr's sacrifice, it all seemed like a surreal nightmare. But the pain in his battered body and the weight of Murloc in his arms were all too real. The pod shuddered as an EDF ship locked onto it with a tractor beam, drawing them into its hangar bay. The pod's hatch hissed open, and a swarm of medics and soldiers surrounded them, helping them out of the cramped vessel. Admiral Hawkins pushed through the crowd, his weathered face etched with a mix of relief and sorrow. "Kevin, Murloc, thank God you're alive. But Zephyr—" Murloc shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "She gave her life to save us all." The Admiral bowed his head, his fists clenched at his sides. "Her sacrifice will not be forgotten." As the medics tended to their wounds, Kevin and Murloc were brought before a hastily convened council of Earth's leaders. They recounted the harrowing battle on the Emperor's flagship, the revelation of the Star Crusher, and Zephyr's final, desperate act. In the days that followed, the world celebrated the hard-won victory over the Lemnorians. Parades filled the streets, and monuments were erected to honor the fallen heroes. But for Kevin and Murloc, the joy was tempered by the aching loss of Zephyr. They threw themselves into the work of rebuilding, determined to honor her memory. The EDF, now armed with captured Lemnorian technology, began a massive overhaul of Earth's defenses. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock to reverse engineer the advanced weaponry and propulsion systems. Kevin and Murloc, their names now synonymous with Earth's salvation, were tasked with leading the newly formed Galactic Defense Program. The GDP's mission was to prepare humanity for the challenges that lay ahead, to ensure that Earth would never again be caught off guard by an alien threat. They poured their hearts and souls into the program, training a new generation of soldiers and scientists. They shared their hard-won knowledge and experience, forging a fighting force that was ready for anything the universe could throw at them. And as they worked side by side, the bond between Kevin and Murloc deepened. The shared traumas and triumphs, the grief and the hope, drew them together in a way that transcended mere friendship or camaraderie. It was a love born in the crucible of war, tempered by loss and sacrifice. But even as they savored the brief respite of peace, a new danger was brewing on the horizon. Far out in the depths of space, a race of parasitic beings known as the Vortaak had been watching the conflict between Earth and the Lemnorians with keen interest. They had seen the tenacity and resourcefulness of the humans, the way they had adapted and overcome against seemingly impossible odds, and they had come to a chilling conclusion. The humans would make the perfect hosts for their insidious plans. Without warning, the Vortaak struck. Their bioships, pulsing with sickly green energy, appeared in Earth's skies, disgorging hordes of grotesque, mutated creatures. The GDP scrambled to respond, but the Vortaak's biotechnology was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The alien monstrosities rampaged through cities, leaving trails of slime and destruction in their wake. They latched onto humans with barbed tendrils, injecting them with a mutagenic virus that twisted them into mindless, shambling abominations. Kevin and Murloc led the charge against the Vortaak, their skills and experience put to the ultimate test. They fought back with every weapon and tactic at their disposal, but the enemy seemed to adapt and evolve with terrifying speed. As the war raged on, they began to uncover the true nature of the Vortaak threat. These were not mere conquerors, but parasites that infected and subsumed other species. They assimilated the knowledge and technology of their hosts, growing stronger and more insidious with each new conquest. The stakes were higher than they had ever been before. If the Vortaak succeeded in taking Earth, they would gain access to the Lemnorian technology that humanity had so painstakingly acquired. With that power at their disposal, they would be unstoppable. Kevin and Murloc knew that they were facing the fight of their lives. The fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy hung in the balance. They steeled themselves for the battles to come, knowing that failure was not an option. They would stand together, no matter the cost, and face this new threat head-on. The Vortaak would learn, as the Lemnorians had before them, the true power of human determination. As the Vortaak invasion swept across the globe, Kevin and Murloc worked tirelessly to coordinate the Earth's defenses, but despite their best efforts, the situation grew more dire by the day. Reports flooded in of key government officials acting erratically, making decisions that seemed to undermine the GDP's strategies at every turn. Kevin slammed his fist on the table, frustration etched in every line of his face. "It doesn't make sense," he growled. "It's like they're deliberately sabotaging us." Murloc's eyes widened with sudden realization. "The Vortaak," she breathed. "They must have infiltrated our leadership, using their parasitic abilities to control them from within." A grim silence settled over the room as the implications sank in. If the Vortaak had already subverted Earth's governments, then the GDP was fighting an enemy that had already outmaneuvered them at every turn. "We have to cut off the head of the snake," Kevin said at last, his voice hard with determination. "We need to take out the Vortaak Queen." Kevin met her gaze, a fierce light in his eyes. "Then that's where we're going. We'll assemble a covert team, infiltrate the mothership, and eliminate the Queen. It's our only chance." The mission began under a shroud of secrecy, with Kevin and Murloc handpicking their most trusted soldiers and outfitting them with the best Lemnorian stealth tech they had. They knew they would only have one shot at this. If they failed, Earth was doomed. As their ship approached the Vortaak mothership, Kevin felt a sense of dread settle over him. The alien vessel was a behemoth, its organic hull pulsing with sickly green light. It looked less like a ship and more like a living, breathing creature. They docked in a remote airlock, the team moving with silent efficiency as they breached the hull and slipped inside. The interior of the ship was a nightmarish labyrinth of twisting, fleshy corridors, the walls seeming to throb with a grotesque parody of life. At every turn, they were met by the Vortak's genetically engineered abominations, hulking, misshapen beasts that seemed to be all teeth and claws and pulsing, cancerous flesh. The team fought with grim determination, their Lemnorian plasma weapons searing through the monsters' hides. But as they pushed deeper into the ship, Kevin began to feel a strange sensation at the back of his mind, a whispering, insidious presence that seemed to claw at the edges of his consciousness. He shook his head, trying to clear it, but the feeling only grew stronger. Suddenly he staggered, his vision swimming. He could feel something burrowing into his mind, a slimy, repulsive presence that made his skin crawl. A Vortak parasite, he realized with horror. It was trying to take control of him. He dimly heard Murloc screaming his name, felt her hands on his shoulders as she shook him, but he was slipping away, his mind drowning in a sea of alien thoughts and impulses. It was a war fought on the landscape of the mind, a clash of wills that sent shockwaves through Kevin's very being. He could feel Murloc's determination, her fierce refusal to let him go, but he could also feel the toll it was taking on her, the way the struggle was shredding her own mental stability. With a final, wrenching effort, Murloc tore the parasite from Kevin's mind, hurling it back into the void. Kevin gasped, his eyes snapping open, his mind his own again. But as he looked at Murloc, he could see the price she had paid. Her eyes were haunted, her face drawn with pain and exhaustion. There was no time to rest, no time to recover. They had to press on to finish what they had started. They fought their way to the heart of the ship, to the Queen's chamber itself. And there, waiting for them, was a horror beyond imagining. The Vortak Queen was a monstrous, bloated thing, her body a mass of pulsing flesh and writhing tentacles, her eyes, multifaceted and gleaming with malevolent intelligence, fixed on them as they entered. The battle that followed was the stuff of nightmares, a desperate, furious struggle against an abomination that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Kevin and Murloc fought side by side, their weapons and powers pushed to the very limit. In the end, it was a combination of human ingenuity and Lemnorian technology that won the day. Kevin, using a modified plasma grenade, managed to breach the Queen's defenses, blasting a hole in her chitinous hide. Murloc, summoning the last of her strength, unleashed a devastating telepathic attack directly into the creature's mind. The Queen convulsed, her massive body thrashing in its death throes. Around them the mothership shuddered and bucked, the Vortak's psychic network unraveling with the loss of its central hub. Kevin and Murloc barely made it back to their ship before the mothership began to break apart, its organic structure collapsing in on itself. They watched from the viewport as it imploded, taking a huge chunk of the Vortak fleet with it. In the days that followed, the GDP led a massive counterattack, driving the disorganized and leaderless Vortak back from Earth's shores. But even as the celebrations began, Kevin and Murloc couldn't shake a sense of unease. For in the wreckage of the mothership, they had found a disturbing discovery. A distress beacon already activated, sending a signal to the distant Vortak homeworld. The Queen's final act had been to alert her species to Earth's location and its potential as a new conquest. As they looked out at the stars, Kevin and Murloc knew that their fight was far from over. The Vortak would come again, in numbers and with weapons they could scarcely imagine. The war for Earth, for the very future of humanity, was only just beginning. As the GDP scrambled to fortify Earth against the looming Vortak threat, Kevin and Murloc prepared for a crucial diplomatic mission. Their first destination, the Lemnorian homeworld, where they hoped to secure an alliance against the parasitic invaders. The Lemnorian council chamber was a cavernous space, its walls adorned with intricate carvings, depicting the Empire's conquests. Kevin and Murloc stood before the gathered leaders, their voices echoing in the vast hall. "People of Lemnoria," Murloc began, her voice steady and strong. "I come before you not as a princess, but as a survivor. The Vortak nearly destroyed Earth, just as they have ravaged countless other worlds. We must stand together against this threat, or we will all fall." Murmurs rippled through the council, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uneasily. A grizzled Lemnorian general stood, his eyes narrowed. "Why should we trust you? You betrayed your own people, sided with the humans against us." Kevin stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "Because we have seen the true face of the enemy. The Vortak care nothing for conquest or glory. They seek only to consume and control, to twist all life to their will. If we do not unite, they will devour us all." Murloc held up a data crystal, its surface shimmering with holographic images. "This contains evidence of the Vortak's parasitic nature, the worlds they have already enslaved. Study it, and you will see the truth of our words." As the council members pored over the data, their expressions shifted from skepticism to horror. The evidence was irrefutable. The Vortak were a plague upon the galaxy, and Lemnoria would be their next target. In the end, the council voted to join forces with Earth, pledging their ships and soldiers to the cause. Kevin and Murloc breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that they had taken the first step towards building a coalition against the Vortak. But as they prepared to depart, a sudden commotion erupted outside the chamber. Shouts and plasma fire echoed through the halls, and a group of armed Lemnorians burst into the room, their weapons trained on Kevin and Murloc. "Traitors!" their leader snarled, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You have betrayed the memory of Emperor Zorgon, sold out our people to the humans. For that, you must die." Kevin and Murloc dove for cover, as plasma bolts sizzled through the air. The loyal council members returned fire, and the chamber dissolved into a chaotic melee of flashing blades and searing energy. In the midst of the battle, Kevin and Murloc fought back-to-back, their movements perfectly synchronized. They had faced death together before, and they would do so again. As the last of the assassins fell, the council members gathered around, their faces grim. "This attack proves that not all of our people are ready to accept this alliance," one said heavily. "There are still those who cling to Zorgon's legacy of conquest and domination." Murloc nodded, her eyes hard. "Then I will speak to them. I will make them see that we must put aside our differences and unite against a common foe. The future of our species depends on it." In the days that followed, Murloc met with the rebel factions, using all her diplomatic skill and royal authority to bring them into the fold. She spoke of the need for unity, of the terrible fate that awaited them all if they did not stand together. Slowly, painfully, the Lemnorian people began to come together. The old divisions and rivalries fell away, replaced by a grim determination to face the Vortak threat as one. With the Lemnorians now firmly committed to the alliance, Kevin and Murloc set out once more, their ship cutting through the stars towards the next world on their list. They had won a victory, but the true test was still to come. The Vortak Empire loomed on the horizon, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. As Kevin and Murloc's ship streaked through hyperspace, the urgent distress call from the Xanthian Confederation blared over the comms. The message was garbled and filled with static, but the desperation in the Xanthian ambassador's voice was clear. "They under attack. Vortak new weapon, minds controlled, turning on each other, need help." Kevin punched the console, his face grim. "Damn it, the Vortak found the Xanthians. We have to get there now." She didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew the stakes. Kevin opened a channel to the Allied fleet. "All ships, this is Robinson. Set course for the Xanthian homeworld, maximum speed. Prepare for immediate engagement upon arrival." Acknowledgements flooded in from the human, Lemnorian and Allied ships. They had all heard the distress call, and they knew what was at risk. As the fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the Xanthian homeworld, the scale of the Vortak attack became clear. Dozens of organic Vortak warships swarmed around the planet, firing sickly green energy beams at the Xanthian defenses, and on the planet's surface the sprawling Xanthian cities were engulfed in flames. the normally peaceful streets now filled with chaos and violence. "My God," Kevin breathed. "They're tearing each other apart down there." Murlock's hands clenched into fists. The Vortak weapon. It must be causing the Xanthians to turn on each other. The Allied fleet wasted no time, engaging the Vortak ships with a fierce barrage of plasma fire and missiles. The void lit up with explosions as the two armadas clashed. Kevin turned to Murlock, his expression hard. "We need to get down there, find that weapon and shut it down. It's the only way to save the Xanthians." Murlock nodded grimly. "Agreed. I'll assemble a ground team. We'll take a stealth shuttle, slip past the battle and land near the largest city. That's likely where the Vortak have set up their mind control device." As the battle raged in orbit, Kevin, Murlock and a squad of elite human and Lemnorian soldiers boarded the shuttle. They rocketed towards the planet's surface, the ship shaking as it passed through the layers of combat. On the ground it was pandemonium. Xanthians, their eyes glazed and their expressions twisted in rage, fought each other in the streets. Plasma fire and explosions ripped through buildings. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burnt flesh. Kevin and Murlock led the charge, their weapons blazing as they fought their way through the city. They had to dodge attacks not just from the Vortak troops, but from the mind-controlled Xanthians as well. It was heart-wrenching, having to fire on the very people they were trying to save. In the city center they found it, a towering spire of pulsing Vortak biotechnology, tendrils snaking out and burrowing into the ground. This was the source of the mind control signal. "There, that must be the device," Murlock shouted over the din of battle. Kevin nodded, his jaw set. "Then let's take it down, hit it with everything we've got." The team unleashed a concentrated barrage of plasma fire and explosives at the spire, but to their shock, the device absorbed the energy, glowing even brighter. "It's not working," a Lemnorian soldier cried. "Our weapons are just making it stronger." Kevin's mind raced. Then he saw it, a shimmering, unstable substance flowing through the spire's core. "That's Xanthium," he exclaimed. "It's fueling the device. We need to destabilize it, overload the system." Murlock's eyes widened in understanding. "Yes, if we can cause a feedback loop in the Xanthium core, it should destroy the device." They adjusted their weapons, aiming for the pulsing heart of the spire. It was a tricky shot. The Xanthium was volatile and the core was well protected. As they fired, a massive Vortak war machine burst from a nearby building, its weapons already aimed at the team. It was a towering monstrosity of flesh and metal, a grotesque fusion of organic and technological horror. "Look out!" Kevin yelled, tackling Murlock out of the way just as a searing beam of energy scorched the ground where they had been standing. The team scattered, taking cover behind rubble and wrecked vehicles. The Vortak machine rampaged through the city square, its weapons tearing through everything in its path. "We can't get a clear shot at the spire with that thing on us," Murlock shouted. Kevin gritted his teeth. "Then we take it down first, aim for the joints, the weak points in its armor." The team unleashed a hail of concentrated fire at the war machine, plasma rounds sparking off its thick hide. It turned, its malevolent gaze fixing on them. Just as it seemed the machine would overwhelm them, a bright lance of energy pierced its side, a shot from orbit. The Allied fleet had broken through and was now providing support from above. The war machine staggered, its armor cracking. Kevin and Murlock seized the opportunity, leading a charge towards the reeling monstrosity. They clambered up its side, finding handholds in its organic flesh, and blasted at point-blank range into its exposed machinery. With a final shuddering groan, the war machine collapsed, its reactor core rupturing in a brilliant explosion. But there was no time to celebrate. The mind control spire still stood, and every second counted. "Now focus fire on the Xanthium core," Kevin commanded. The team unleashed everything they had, pouring plasma and explosives into the heart of the spire. The Xanthium pulsed and writhed, growing brighter and more unstable. They barely made it to cover before the spire detonated in a blinding flash of light and a shockwave that leveled buildings for blocks. As the dust settled, an eerie silence fell over the city. The Xanthians, freed from the mind control, looked around in confusion and horror at the destruction they had wrought upon their own home. Kevin and Murlock emerged from the rubble, battered and bloodied but alive. They looked out over the city, taking in the scope of the devastation. "We did it," Kevin said softly. "We stopped the weapon." "But at what cost?" Murlock replied, her voice heavy with sorrow. "The Xanthians will need our help to rebuild, to recover from this tragedy." Kevin nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. "And we'll give it to them. The Vortak will pay for what they've done here." As if on cue, a sleek Xanthian ship descended from the sky, bearing the markings of the Confederation leadership. It landed near Kevin and Murlock, and a delegation of Xanthians emerged, their faces a mix of gratitude and grim determination. "Humans Lemnorians," the lead Xanthian said, bowing deeply. "We owe you a debt we can never repay. You saved our people from a fate worse than death." "We only did what was right," Murlock said. "The Vortak are a threat to us all. We must stand together against them." The Xanthian nodded. "And stand we shall. The Xanthian Confederation hereby pledges its full support and resources to the Alliance. Together, we will bring an end to the Vortak menace, once and for all." As the Xanthian delegation and the Allied soldiers began coordinating relief efforts and planning their next move, Kevin and Murlock shared a look of weary determination. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. With the Xanthians now at their side, they knew they stood a better chance than ever. But the Vortak would not rest, and neither could they. The fate of the galaxy was in their hands, and failure was not an option. There would be more battles to come, more sacrifices to be made, but they would face it all together until the Vortak threat was eliminated and peace was restored to the stars. In the war room of the Allied command ship, a holographic display flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow over the faces of Kevin, Murlock, and the assembled military leaders. The image resolved into a sprawling star system, dotted with swirling nebulae and glittering asteroids. "This is the intelligence we've gathered," Admiral Hawkins said, his voice grave. "The Vortak are breeding a new fleet of organic ships in this hidden system, using the DNA of the species they've conquered." Kevin leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the display. "Those ships could turn the tide of the war. We have to take them out before they can be deployed." Murlock nodded, her blue skin gleaming in the holographic light. "Agreed, but it won't be easy. The Vortak will have that system heavily guarded." "That's where you two come in," Hawkins said. "We need a covert team to infiltrate the breeding grounds and sabotage those ships. You'll be leading a squad of our best soldiers, hand-picked from across the Alliance." Kevin and Murlock exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. They both knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. "We're in," Kevin said. "When do we leave?" The infiltration team moved silently through the twisted corridors of the Vortak breeding facility, their stolen stealth armor blending them into the organic walls. The air was thick with the stench of rotting flesh and strange chemicals, and the floor pulsed beneath their feet like a living thing. Kevin held up a fist, signaling the team to halt. He peered around a corner, his enhanced visor scanning for threats. "I've got movement up ahead. Vortak guards, heavily armed." Murlock crept up beside him, her own visor glowing softly. "I count at least a dozen. We'll have to take them out quietly." Kevin nodded, unsheathing his plasma blade. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, go." But the commotion had not gone unnoticed. Alarms began to wail, and the walls themselves seemed to shudder and writhe. "They know we're here," Kevin shouted over the din. "Push forward to the central chamber." They fought their way deeper into the facility, plasma flying and blades clashing against chitinous armor. Every step revealed new horrors, vast tanks filled with pulsating half-formed ships, their hulls woven from the flesh of 100 different species. At last they reached the central control room, a cavernous space dominated by a towering mass of fleshy tendrils and flickering screens. And there, standing before it, was a hunched figure in a stained lab coat. "Welcome, interlopers," the Vortak scientist hissed, his voice a rasping whisper. "You are just in time to witness the birth of a new era." Kevin leveled his rifle at the scientist's head. "It's over. We're shutting this place down." But the scientist only laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You are too late. The process has already begun. Soon these ships will be unleashed upon your pitiful alliance, and the Vortak will consume all." Murloc stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Not if we have anything to say about it." She lunged at the scientist, her blade flashing. The Vortak screeched and dodged, his body twisting in impossible ways. They grappled, rolling across the fleshy floor as Kevin and the others raced to plant their explosives on the vital systems. Murloc disengaged from the scientist with a powerful kick, sending him sprawling. She sprinted for the exit, Kevin and the team close behind. They ran through the crumbling corridors as the explosions began, the facility shaking itself apart around them. Fleshy walls burst open, spilling ichor and writhing tendrils. They leaped over gaping chasms, dodged falling debris, always just one step ahead of the destruction. At last they burst out into the void of the hangar bay, their ship waiting. But as they scrambled aboard, a terrible sight caught their eyes. Rising from the ruins of the breeding facility was a monstrous shape, a ship unlike any they had seen before. It was vast, its hull a writhing mass of flesh and bone, its form ever shifting. And from its depths came a sound, a haunting cry that echoed through their minds and souls. "What is that thing?" one of the soldiers whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Kevin said, his face grim, "but I think we just made it angry." The newborn ship turned, its malevolent gaze fixing on their tiny vessel. It let out another scream, a sound of rage and hunger, and began to give chase. Kevin slammed his hand on the airlock controls, sealing the ship. "Get us out of here, now!" The pilot, a grizzled Lemnorian veteran, didn't need to be told twice. The engines roared to life and they rocketed away from the crumbling station, the monstrous ship in hot pursuit. Its cries echoed through the void as they fled, a promise of horrors yet to come. The war had taken a terrifying new turn, and they had just unleashed a nightmare upon the galaxy. As the newborn Vortak ship's haunting cries echoed through the void, Kevin and Murloc's battered vessel limped back to the Allied fleet. The stealth shuttle shuddered and sparked, its hull scorched by the sentient ship's relentless assault. Inside, the strike team slumped in their seats, nursing their wounds and struggling to process the horrors they had witnessed in the breeding facility. Kevin slammed his fist against the bulkhead, his face twisted in frustration. "Damn it, we were so close. If that thing hadn't been born." Murloc placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch calming him. "We did what we had to do. The breeding facility is destroyed, but you're right, this new ship, it changes everything." As they docked with the command ship, Admiral Hawkins greeted them, his weathered face etched with concern. "Robinson, Murloc, what happened out there? We saw the explosion, and then that thing emerged." In the briefing room, Kevin and Murloc laid out the grim reality of the Vortak's new weapon. They described the vast, pulsating ships grown from the DNA of conquered species, the sickening fusion of organic and inorganic material, and they spoke of the newborn ship, the terrifying product of the Vortak's twisted experiments. The Allied leaders listened in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Admiral Hawkins leaned forward, his voice grave. "If the Vortak can produce more of these sentient ships, our fleets won't stand a chance. We have to strike now, hit them where they're most vulnerable." A holographic display flickered to life, showing a sprawling Vortak industrial complex. "This is their main production hub," Hawkins explained. "Intel suggests this is where they'll be manufacturing the new ships. We have to take it out." The room erupted in a flurry of activity as the leaders began to plan the attack. Ships and troops were allocated, strategies were debated and refined. The strike, dubbed Operation Starfall, would be the largest coordinated assault the Allies had ever attempted. As the fleets assembled and the troops prepared for battle, Kevin and Murloc stole a quiet moment together. They stood on the observation deck, watching the Allied ships drift past, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. "We've come so far," Murloc whispered, her hand finding Kevin's. "But this fight, it feels different, like we're standing on the edge of something we can't come back from." Kevin squeezed her hand, his eyes hard with determination. "We'll make it through this together, and we'll end this war once and for all." The jump to the Vortac system was short and tense, the anticipation of battle thrumming through every ship. As they emerged from hyperspace, the Vortac defenses were already scrambling, their ships moving to intercept the Allied fleet. And then all hell broke loose. The void lit up with the flare of weapons fire, missiles and plasma bolts crisscrossing the space between the fleets. Ships exploded and shattered, their debris spinning off into the darkness. In the midst of the chaos, Kevin and Murloc's strike team launched from the command ship, their small, agile craft weaving through the battle towards the production hub. The facility loomed before them, a monstrous construct of twisted metal and pulsing organic material. They punched through the outer defenses, their ship shaking as the Vortac guns hammered at their shields. The landing was rough, the craft skidding across the hangar bay in a shower of sparks. But they were in. Kevin and Murloc led the charge, their weapons spitting plasma as they fought their way into the heart of the facility. Every step was a battle, every corridor a gauntlet of Vortac warriors and their abominable creations. The deeper they pushed, the more bizarre and terrifying the creatures became. Lumbering monstrosities of flesh and metal, their forms a nightmarish patchwork of species. Skittering horrors that scuttled along the walls and ceilings, their limbs a blur of razor-sharp claws. And through it all, the pulsing, sickening presence of the Vortac's organic technology. The walls seemed to throb and shift, the air thick with the stench of decay. At last, they reached the central control room, a cavernous space dominated by a pulsing, fleshy mass. And there, suspended in a web of glowing tendrils, were the consciousnesses of the captured aliens, their minds enslaved to the Vortac's twisted will. Murloc stumbled, her eyes wide with horror. "No, it can't be." Among the trapped minds, she sensed a presence she knew all too well, a mind she had touched before, a soul she had thought lost forever. Kevin gripped her shoulder, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "Murloc, I'm so sorry, but we have to—" He didn't need to finish. They both knew what had to be done. The Vortac could not be allowed to unleash their sentient ships upon the galaxy, no matter the cost. With shaking hands, Murloc raised her weapon, aiming it at the heart of the control system. "Forgive me, sister," she whispered. "Forgive me." She fired, and the world exploded. The control system burst apart in a shower of sparks and gore, the trapped consciousnesses screaming as they were ripped away. The facility shuddered, the chain reaction tearing through its structure. "Go, go, go," Kevin yelled, dragging Murloc towards the exit. They ran, the strike team close behind as the production hub collapsed around them. Fire and debris rained down, the very air seeming to burn. They barely made it to the ship, throwing themselves inside as the hangar crumbled. The craft rocketed away, the shockwave of the exploding facility hot on its heels. From the viewport, they watched as the production hub vanished in a blinding flash, a miniature sun blooming in the heart of the Vortac system. The Allied fleet, battered but victorious, regrouped, the remnants of the Vortac forces fleeing into the void. But there was no joy in the victory, no sense of triumph. In the cockpit, Murloc wept, her body shaking with grief. Kevin held her, his own heart aching, as the cruel reality of war crashed down upon them. They had won the battle, but the cost had been higher than they ever could have imagined, and as the fleet turned for home, the scars of the conflict etched deep into their souls. They knew that the war was far from over. The Vortac would not rest, and neither could they. The fight for the galaxy, for the very future of all sentient life, had only just begun. The victory at the Vortac production hub was short-lived, as troubling reports began to flood in from across the galaxy. The Vortac forces were retreating en masse, pulling back to their home system in a coordinated withdrawal. While many in the Allied command celebrated this as a sign of their impending triumph, Kevin and Murloc exchanged uneasy glances. "They're up to something," Kevin muttered. His brow furrowed as he studied the holographic star maps. The Vortak don't just give up ground like this. They're planning their next move. Murlock nodded, her eyes hard. Agreed, we need more intel. We can't afford to be caught off guard again. Their fears were confirmed when a Xanthian scout ship, patrolling the edges of Vortak space, stumbled upon a massive enemy fleet gathering at the fringes of their home system. The scout's sensors had detected a strange energy signature emanating from the heart of the fleet, a pulsating rhythm that seemed to warp the very fabric of space around it. The Xanthian captain, her voice tight with barely contained dread, relayed the findings to the Allied command. It's like nothing we've ever seen before, she said, her image flickering on the view screen. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever they're doing, it's big and it's dangerous. Kevin and Murlock wasted no time in assembling a team of their best and brightest, soldiers, scientists and specialists from across the Allied races. They knew they had to act fast, to uncover the nature of the Vortak's new weapon before it was too late. As their ship approached the Vortak fleet, the strange energy signature grew stronger, the very hull of their vessel vibrating with its power. Kevin gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white with tension. Murlock, at his side, had her eyes closed, her face a mask of concentration as she reached out with her telepathic senses. And then, without warning, the universe seemed to twist around them. Colors inverted, shapes warped and distorted, and a sickening sense of vertigo swept through the ship. Alarms blared and warning lights flashed as the vessel shuddered and bucked, caught in the grip of an inexorable force. When the chaos subsided, they found themselves in a realm beyond comprehension. The normal stars and planets were gone, replaced by a seething, pulsating landscape of raw energy and twisted matter. Shapes that defied geometry loomed in the distance, and the very air seemed to hum with a malevolent intelligence. "By the gods," Murlock whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "The Vortak, they've created a pocket dimension, a realm where they can harness the power of the consciousnesses they've stolen." As the team disembarked, weapons at the ready, they were immediately assaulted by a barrage of sensations. The ground beneath their feet shifted and undulated as if alive. The air was filled with the tortured whispers of 1 billion stolen souls, their anguish and despair palpable. And everywhere the twisted manifestations of the Vortak's power, nightmarish creatures born from the fusion of stolen DNA and the raw stuff of the pocket dimension. They attacked with a ferocity and savagery that defied reason, their forms shifting and changing in a kaleidoscope of horror. Kevin and Murlock fought back to back, their weapons blazing, their movements perfectly synchronized. Around them the team struggled against the onslaught, the Xanthian scientists working frantically to analyze the nature of the pocket dimension, searching for any weakness they could exploit. But as they pressed deeper into the nightmare realm, Kevin and Murlock made a chilling discovery. At the heart of the pocket dimension, the Vortak were growing a new breed of sentient ships, vast, pulsating monstrosities that seemed to warp reality around them, ships that could bend the very laws of physics to their will. "We have to stop them," Kevin growled, his face splattered with the ichor of the Vortak's creations. "If those ships are completed, nowhere in the galaxy will be safe." Murlock nodded, her eyes hard with determination. "The key is the trapped consciousnesses. They're the power source for all of this. If we can free them, disrupt the Vortak's control, then the pocket dimension will collapse," Kevin finished, "and take those abominations with it." They rallied the team, a desperate plan taking shape. They would fight their way to the heart of the pocket dimension, to the nexus where the stolen consciousnesses were held, and there they would make their stand. As they fought, Kevin and Murlock reached out with their minds, their love and compassion a beacon in the darkness. They called to the trapped souls, urging them to fight, to remember who they once were. And slowly, miraculously, they began to respond. The twisted manifestations of the Vortak's power started to falter, to turn against their masters. The very fabric of the pocket dimension began to quake and shudder. Kevin and Murlock charged forward, their team surging behind them like a tidal wave of righteous fury. The Vortak control center loomed ahead, a twisted monstrosity of pulsing flesh and thrumming machinery. Its surface writhed with Vortak defenders, their chitinous armor glistening in the sickly light of the pocket dimension. "Push forward," Kevin roared, his plasma rifle spitting fire into the Vortak ranks. "We have to reach the Overmind." Murloc fought at his side, her telepathic powers lashing out to shatter the minds of the Vortak warriors. The air crackled with psychic energy as more and more of the trapped consciousnesses broke free from their bonds, joining the rebellion against their Vortak oppressors. The team crashed into the Vortak lines like a hammer blow, their weapons flashing and their battle cries echoing across the twisted landscape. Vortak bodies fell in droves, their ichor staining the fleshy ground. But for every defender that fell, two more seemed to take their place, each more vicious and desperate than the last. They could sense their control over the pocket dimension slipping away, and they fought with the ferocity of cornered beasts. Inch by bloody inch, Kevin and Murloc led their team towards the heart of the control center. The structure pulsed and throbbed around them, like the beating heart of some colossal beast. At last, they burst into the central chamber, a cavernous space dominated by a seething mass of flesh and metal, and there, at its center, was the Vortak Overmind. It was a thing of nightmare, a monstrous fusion of conquered consciousnesses and Vortak technology. Its form shifted and warped, never settling on a single shape, its surface a kaleidoscope of screaming faces and writhing tentacles. "Foolish mortals," it boomed, its voice a cacophony of 1,000 stolen voices. "You dare to defy the Vortak? We are the future, the inevitable evolution of all life in the galaxy." "You're nothing but a parasite," Kevin snarled, leveling his rifle at the abomination. "A cancer that needs to be cut out." The Overmind laughed, a sound that made the team's skin crawl. "You cannot defeat me," it gloated. "I wield the power of 1,000 conquered species, the might to reshape reality itself." The chamber shuddered and warped around them as the Overmind brought its terrible power to bear. The team was flung back, their weapons ripped from their hands by invisible forces. But Kevin and Murloc stood firm, their love for each other a shining beacon in the darkness. They reached out with their minds, their psychic link flaring to life like a supernova. Suddenly they were more than just two individuals. They were a conduit, a channel for the collective might of every rebellious consciousness in the pocket dimension. The stolen power of 100 species flowed through them, fusing with their own indomitable wills. "You made a mistake, Overmind," Murloc said, her voice ringing with the strength of 1,000 heroes. "You thought you could control us, enslave us, but in doing so, you've only made us stronger." Together, Kevin and Murloc unleashed a psychic blast that shook the pocket dimension to its very foundations. The Overmind reeled back, its form fracturing and splintering under the onslaught. Its hold on the trapped consciousnesses faltered, and they surged free in a tidal wave of liberated will. "No, no," the Overmind screamed, its voice distorting and fracturing. "I am eternal, I am invincible." But it was too late. The freed consciousnesses rallied around Kevin and Murloc, their minds joining in a final devastating assault. They poured their rage, their pain, their unbreakable determination into a single, unified blow that struck the Overmind like the fist of an avenging god. The Overmind shattered, its form exploding in a maelstrom of shredded flesh and sparking machinery. The control center buckled and collapsed, the pocket dimension unraveling around it like a tapestry come undone. Go now," Kevin yelled, grabbing Murloc's hand. Together they raced for the exit, the team and the freed consciousnesses close behind. The realm crumbled and dissolved, the very fabric of its reality breaking down. In a flash of blinding light, they emerged back into the physical universe, the pocket dimension collapsing behind them like a dying star. They had won. The Overmind was destroyed, and the Vortak's greatest weapon had been shattered. But as Kevin and Murloc collapsed to the deck of the waiting ship, their bodies battered and their minds stretched to the breaking point, they knew that their fight was far from over. The Vortak would not take this defeat lightly, and they would be back more determined than ever to conquer and enslave. But for now they had each other, and they had the gratitude and support of every species they had freed. They would face the challenges to come as they always had, together, united by a bond that was stronger than any weapon, more powerful than any enemy. With the Overmind shattered and the pocket dimension collapsing around them, Kevin and Murloc raced back to the Allied fleet, their battered ship dodging the debris of the crumbling realm. As they emerged into normal space, they were greeted by a scene of utter chaos. Seizing the opportunity, Admiral Hawkins gave the order to attack. The Allied ships surged forward, their weapons blazing as they tore into the disorganized Vortak forces. Plasma beams and missile barrages lit up the void, turning the once mighty Vortak warships into blooms of fire and shattered metal. But even as the Allies pressed their advantage, Kevin and Murloc knew that the fight was far from over. They had struck a devastating blow against the Vortak, but the parasitic species was nothing if not tenacious. They would regroup, adapt, and come back even stronger. As if on cue, a distress call crackled over the comm, the signal weak and distorted. It was coming from a nearby planet, a small, unremarkable world that had thus far been beneath the Vortak's notice. But as Kevin and Murloc listened to the desperate plea for help, a cold realization dawned on them. This planet was no ordinary world. It was the secret lair of the Vortak Queen, the true power behind the parasitic empire. While the Overmind had been the face of the Vortak's conquest, it was the Queen who had been pulling the strings all along, directing the war effort from the shadows. Without hesitation, Kevin and Murloc gathered a strike team of their most trusted allies and set course for the planet's surface. They knew that this was their chance to end the war once and for all, to cut off the head of the Vortak snake and watch the body wither and die. As their dropship punched through the atmosphere, they were greeted by a barrage of anti-aircraft fire. The Queen's elite guard, a hand-picked force of the most vicious and fanatical Vortak warriors, had been waiting for them. The dropship shuddered and bucked as it took hits, alarms blaring and sparks flying from shattered consoles. But Kevin and Murloc were undeterred. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now. With grim determination, they donned their battle armor and readied their weapons, the dropship's ramp lowering to reveal a hellish landscape of twisted flesh and pulsing biomechanical structures. The Queen's lair was a nightmarish fusion of organic and inorganic, a place where the boundaries between living tissue and cold metal blurred into obscenity. The very ground seemed to throb and writhe beneath their feet, as if the planet itself was a living, breathing thing. And everywhere the Queen's Guard swarmed like angry hornets, their chitinous armor glistening in the sickly light. They came at the strike team in waves, plasma blasts and razor-sharp claws, seeking to rend and tear. But Kevin and Murloc were a force to be reckoned with, their bond forged in the crucible of war and tempered by the love they shared. They fought back to back, their movements perfectly synchronized, each covering the other's blind spots and weaknesses. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Kevin's rifle barked, each shot finding its mark with uncanny precision. Murloc was a whirlwind of motion, her energy blades carving through the Vortak ranks like a scythe through wheat. Together, they pushed deeper into the Queen's lair, the strike team forming a wedge behind them. They blasted through walls of pulsing flesh and shattered barriers of twisted metal, all the while feeling the malevolent presence of the Queen growing stronger and stronger. And then at last they stood before her. The Vortak Queen was a thing of nightmare, a massive bloated abomination that seemed to fill the entire chamber. Her body was a seething mass of flesh and chitin, pulsing with a sickly inner light. And from her myriad eyes, a piercing intelligence stared back at them, ancient and cruel. "You think you have won?" the Queen hissed, her voice a discordant chorus of 1,000 stolen minds. "You are nothing. Insects to be crushed beneath my heel." But even as the words left her twisted maw, Kevin and Murloc felt something else beneath the surface, a flicker of fear hastily concealed. The Queen was powerful, yes, but she was not invincible, and in the bond between this human and this alien, she sensed a threat unlike any she had ever faced. With a roar of defiance, the Queen lashed out with her psychic might, seeking to crush their minds like eggshells. Kevin and Murloc staggered under the assault, their vision flickering and their ears ringing with the screams of the damned. But they did not fall. They clung to each other, their love and trust a shield against the Queen's malevolence, and as they pushed back against her psychic onslaught, they felt something shift within the hive mind, a crack in the impenetrable wall of the Queen's power. Seizing the opportunity, they dove into the breach, their minds merging into a single unstoppable force. They plunged into the heart of the hive mind, past the stolen consciousnesses and devouring hunger, to the very core of the Queen's being. And there, in the depths of the psychic maelstrom, they found what they were looking for. A weakness, a flaw in the Queen's armor. A tiny spark of individuality, buried beneath the crushing weight of the hive mind. It was the minds of the conquered species, the ones the Queen had stolen and subsumed. Though they had been suppressed and enslaved, they had never truly been extinguished. And now, with Kevin and Murloc acting as a conduit, they surged to the surface, a tidal wave of psychic energy that crashed against the Queen's defenses. The Queen reeled under the onslaught, her hive mind fracturing and splintering. The chamber shook with the force of the psychic backlash, the very foundations of the lair cracking and splitting. And through it all, Kevin and Murloc held fast, pouring every ounce of their strength and love into the fight. They could feel the Queen's hive mind unraveling around them, the stolen consciousnesses breaking free one by one. With a final, desperate surge, they struck at the heart of the Queen's being, a lance of pure psychic energy that pierced through her defenses and shattered her mind like glass. The Queen convulsed, a scream of agony and defeat tearing from her throat. And then, in a blinding flash of light, she was gone, her body disintegrating into a cloud of ash and dust. Around them, the lair began to collapse, the psychic feedback tearing it apart at the seams. The strike team raced for the exit, dodging falling debris and gouts of corrosive fluid. They piled into the dropship, Kevin and Murloc the last to board, their armor battered and their faces streaked with sweat and grime. As the dropship rocketed away from the dying planet, Kevin and Murloc collapsed into each other's arms, their exhaustion finally catching up with them. They had done it. The Queen was dead, and the Vortak Empire was crumbling. The galaxy was free. But even as they allowed themselves a moment of relief, they knew that their work was not yet done. The Vortak had been defeated, but there would always be new threats waiting in the darkness of space, and as long as they had each other, they would be ready to face them head-on, no matter the odds. The dropship soared through the stars, carrying the heroes of the galaxy towards an uncertain future. But for now, at least, they could rest. They had earned it. With the Vortak Queen's death throes still echoing through the cosmos, the remnants of her once mighty empire laid down their arms in surrender. The Allies, battered but unbroken, set about the monumental task of rebuilding the shattered worlds left in the war's wake. Kevin and Murloc, their bond forged in the crucible of conflict, stepped into their new roles as ambassadors with a fierce determination. They traveled from system to system, meeting with the leaders of the various species that had fought side by side against the Vortak menace. But not all were ready to embrace the new era of peace. On the Lemnorian homeworld, a faction of hardliners seethed with resentment over their defeat at the hands of the humans and their allies. They rallied behind a charismatic warrior named Zorthak, who stoked the flames of their anger and hatred. "We will not bow to these upstarts," Zorthak roared to his followers, his cybernetic eye glinting with malice. "The Lemnorian Empire will rise again, and we will crush all who stand in our way." Under Zorthak's leadership, the hardliners launched a campaign of terror, striking at both their own people and the allied worlds. Bombs ripped through crowded marketplaces, supply lines were severed, and diplomats vanished without a trace. Kevin and Murloc, working closely with the Lemnorian authorities, set out to uncover the hardliners' base of operations. They infiltrated the group's network, posing as disaffected warriors seeking to join Zorthak's cause. In dimly lit back rooms and seedy spaceport bars, they worked their way deeper into the hardliners' inner circle. They endured the suspicion and brutality of Zorthak's lieutenants, never breaking character, even as they gathered vital intelligence. And then, in a clandestine meeting with one of Zorthak's most trusted advisors, they learned the truth. The hardliner leader had been experimenting with captured Vortak technology, seeking to create an army of mind-controlled soldiers. "With this power we will be unstoppable," the advisor gloated, his eyes gleaming with fanatical zeal. "The galaxy will tremble before the might of the Lemnorian Empire reborn." Kevin and Murloc exchanged a grim look. They knew they had to act fast, before Zorthak could unleash his abominations upon an unsuspecting galaxy. They gathered a strike team of their most trusted allies and launched a daring raid on Zorthak's hidden base. They blasted through the outer defenses, their weapons spitting plasma as they fought their way into the heart of the complex. And there, in a cavernous laboratory thrumming with stolen Vortak tech, they confronted Zorthak himself. The hardliner leader was a towering figure, his body a fusion of flesh and metal, pulsing with an eerie green light. "Fools!" he bellowed, his voice a mechanical roar. "You dare to stand against me? I am the future of the Lemnorian race, the instrument of our destiny." He lunged at Kevin and Murloc, his cybernetic enhancements lending him inhuman speed and strength. They met him head-on, their own skills and experience matched against his raw power. The battle was brutal and desperate, a whirlwind of slashing blades and searing plasma. Zorthak seemed to shrug off wounds that would have felled a lesser being, his cybernetics knitting flesh and bone back together as fast as they could rend it apart. But Kevin and Murloc fought on, their bond and their love for each other giving them strength beyond measure. They moved as one, anticipating each other's moves and covering each other's weaknesses. And then, in a moment of terrible clarity, Murloc saw their chance. Zorthak's cybernetics, for all their power, were still based on Vortak technology, and she still carried within her the remnants of the enhancements she had gained during their battle with the Overmind. With a cry of defiance, she unleashed a surging pulse of energy directly into Zorthak's systems. The hardliner leader convulsed, his cybernetics overloading and exploding in a shower of sparks and shrapnel. But the feedback tore through Murloc's body as well, shredding her own enhancements and sending her crashing to the floor. Kevin was at her side in an instant, cradling her broken form in his arms. "Stay with me, my love," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "Don't you leave me, not now, not after all we've been through." Murloc's eyes fluttered open, her blue skin ashen with pain. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, her hand reaching up to caress Kevin's cheek. "I made a promise, remember? To stand by your side no matter what." Kevin clasped her hand in his heart swelling with a love that transcended the boundaries of species and space. "Then let's make it official," he said softly. "Marry me, Murloc. Be my wife, my partner, my everything." Murloc's answer was a kiss, fierce and passionate, and filled with all the love and devotion of a lifetime. In that moment, as the wreckage of Zorthak's base burned around them, they knew that their bond was unbreakable, that they would face whatever challenges the future held together. The Lemnorian hardliners were broken, their leader dead and their plans in ruins. But Kevin and Murloc knew that their work was far from over. There would always be those who sought to sow chaos and discord, who refused to let go of old hatreds and grudges. But they would be there to meet them, side by side, united by a love that had been forged in the fires of war and tempered by the unbreakable strength of their bond. Together, they would build a new galaxy, one where all species could live in peace and harmony. As they emerged from the smoking ruins of Zorthak's base, Kevin swept Murloc into his arms, ignoring the pain of his own wounds. He carried her to the waiting medship, never letting go of her hand. "I love you," he whispered as the ship's medics swarmed around them. "I love you more than life itself." The medship lifted off, carrying them up and away from the battlefield, towards a future that was theirs to shape. A future where their love would be the guiding light, the unbreakable bond that would lead the galaxy into a new era of peace and hope. As Murloc recovered in the medical bay, her wounds slowly knitting together under the regenerative field, Kevin pored over wedding plans with a single-minded focus. He was determined to make their union a symbol of the new era of cooperation they had ushered in, a grand celebration that would bring together all the races and cultures they had fought alongside. He was just finalizing the guest list, a dizzying array of dignitaries and warriors from a dozen worlds, when the comm system chimed with an urgent message. Kevin frowned, setting aside his datapad and activating the holographic display. Admiral Hawkins' weathered face flickered into view, his expression grave. "Kevin, we've picked up a distress signal from an uncharted system on the edge of known space. It's faint, but it's definitely Lemnorian in origin." "That's just it," Hawkins said. "The signal is encoded with an ancient cipher, one that hasn't been used since before the Lemnorian Empire began its conquest of the galaxy. It suggests—" He paused as if hardly believing his own words. "It suggests the existence of a lost Lemnorian colony, one that predates the Empire itself." Kevin's mind raced with the implications. A lost colony isolated from the rest of Lemnorian civilization for millennia. What secrets might they have preserved? What knowledge lost to the ages? He glanced over at Murlock's sleeping form, her face peaceful despite the bandages that still wrapped her body. This could be the key to truly uniting the Lemnorian people, to healing the rifts that still lingered. "Assemble a team," Kevin said, his voice firm with resolve. "We are going to investigate that signal." Within hours, the Xanthian research vessel Luminos left dock, its sleek silver hull glinting in the starlight. Kevin and Murlock stood on the bridge, watching the stars blur into streaks as the ship leapt into hyperdrive. Their team was small but formidable. Admiral Hawkins, his tactical brilliance invaluable on any mission. Zakthar, the Lemnorian warrior, who had once served as Emperor Zorgan's personal guard, but had since become one of Murlock's most loyal allies. And Zeltor, a Xanthian scientist whose genius was unmatched in the fields of xenobiology and ancient civilizations. As the Luminos plunged deeper into uncharted space, the mood on the ship grew tense with anticipation. They were venturing into the unknown, chasing a mystery that had lain hidden for thousands of years. It was Zeltor who first noticed the anomaly, his sensitive instruments detecting a massive distortion in the fabric of space-time. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," he breathed, his compound eyes wide with wonder and trepidation. A massive energy field, warping the very nature of reality around it. Kevin and Murlock exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. They had faced strange and terrifying phenomena before, but this felt different. There was a weight to it, a sense of ancient power and forgotten secrets. Hawkins ordered the ship to a halt at the edge of the anomaly, unwilling to risk plunging headlong into the unknown. But even as they debated their next move, the decision was taken out of their hands. The anomaly surged, tendrils of shimmering energy lashing out and ensnaring the Luminos. The ship shuddered and bucked, alarms blaring as the crew fought to maintain control. Kevin and Murlock were thrown from their seats, the bridge tilting wildly around them. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. The ship emerged from the anomaly, the stars outside the viewport unfamiliar and strange. They had been pulled through, transported to a hidden corner of the galaxy, untouched by the passage of eons. Scans revealed a single planet orbiting a dim, ancient star. Its surface was a patchwork of dense jungles and vast, sprawling ruins, the remnants of a civilization long lost to history. As the Luminos descended through the atmosphere, Kevin felt a sense of awe and trepidation wash over him. What secrets lay waiting on the surface of this forgotten world? What dangers lurked in the shadows of its crumbling monuments? The ship settled onto a broad plaza, the stone worn smooth by the passage of untold ages. As the ramp lowered and the team stepped out onto the surface, they were met by a sight that stole the breath from their lungs. A group of Lemnorians stood waiting for them, their skin the same deep blue as Murlock's, but their clothing and weapons primitive, crafted from leather and stone and wood. At their head stood an ancient figure, his face lined with age and wisdom. "Welcome, travelers," he said, his voice resonating with a power that seemed to echo through the very stones beneath their feet. "I am Kazrak, elder of the Kalmor tribe. We have waited long for your coming." As Kevin and Murloc stepped forward, their hearts racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, they knew that they stood on the threshold of a revelation that would change the course of the galaxy itself. The lost colony of the Lemnorians had been found, and with it a secret that had the power to shape the future of all the races that called the stars their home. Over the days that followed, Kevin and Murloc spent long hours with Kazrak and his people, learning of their history and their culture. They heard tales of the great cataclysm that had driven their ancestors from the Lemnorian homeworld, of the long journey through the stars that had brought them to this hidden refuge. But it was the story of the artifact that truly chilled their blood. An ancient Vortak relic, a weapon of unimaginable power that twisted the minds of all who came near it. It had been this dark influence that had corrupted the Lemnorian leadership, that had set them on the path of conquest and domination. "The artifact was brought here by our ancestors," Kazrak explained, his eyes haunted by the weight of the knowledge. "They sought to keep it hidden, to protect the galaxy from its malevolent influence. For generations, our people have guarded it, waiting for the day when one worthy of its power would come to claim it." Kevin and Murloc exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. The artifact was a threat, a danger that could not be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. But it was also an opportunity, a chance to unravel the secrets of the Vortak and perhaps find a way to defeat them once and for all. "We must see this artifact," Kevin said, his voice firm with resolve. "If it truly holds the power you say, then we have a responsibility to ensure it is never used for evil again." Kazrak nodded, his ancient eyes glinting with a mix of respect and trepidation. "I knew you would say that," he said softly. "I see the strength in you, the purity of your hearts. Perhaps you are indeed the ones the prophecy spoke of." He rose to his feet, his aged body still strong and proud. "Come," he said, beckoning them to follow. "The artifact lies hidden in the heart of the ruins, guarded by traps and trials left by our ancestors. If you are truly worthy, then you will pass through unscathed. But be warned," he added, his voice dropping to a grave whisper. "The power of the artifact is not to be trifled with. It will test you in ways you cannot imagine, and the price of failure is higher than you can comprehend." With those ominous words ringing in their ears, Kevin and Murloc set out into the depths of the ancient Lemnorian ruins, their hearts heavy with the weight of the task before them. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the secrets of the past held the key to the future. Kevin and Murloc exchanged a determined look, the weight of their mission settling heavily on their shoulders. With the ancient Vortak artifact threatening to unleash untold horrors upon the galaxy, they knew they had to act fast. Gathering their team, they set out into the heart of the lost Lemnorian colony's ruins, the crumbling stone structures looming ominously above them. Admiral Hawkins took point, his plasma rifle at the ready. Zakthar, the grizzled Lemnorian warrior, scanned their surroundings with a keen eye, his hand resting on the hilt of his energy blade. Zeltor brought up the rear, his Xanthian sensory equipment casting an eerie glow in the gloom. As they navigated the treacherous ruins, picking their way through collapsed corridors and vine-choked chambers, a sense of unease began to grow. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and strange shadows seemed to flicker at the edges of their vision. Suddenly a barrage of plasma fire erupted from the darkness, searing the ancient stone. Vortak warriors, their chitin armor gleaming in the dim light, swarmed from the shadows, their weapons blazing. At their head stood Kravox, a towering figure of menace, his eyes glinting with malevolent intelligence. Kevin and Murloc dove for cover, plasma bolts sizzling overhead. Admiral Hawkins and Zakthar returned fire, their weapons spitting deadly energy. Zeltor, his face a mask of concentration, tapped furiously at his wrist computer. "The artifact is close," he shouted over the din of battle. "Just ahead in the central chamber." Kevin nodded grimly, pumping a burst of plasma fire into a charging Vortak warrior. "We have to get to it before Kravox does." Murloc, her face set with determination, reached out with her mind, seeking to locate Kravox amidst the chaos. She gasped as she sensed the warlord's presence, his psyche a roiling mass of hatred and ambition. The team fought their way forward, inch by bloody inch, the Vortak warriors falling before their onslaught. They burst into the central chamber, a vast vaulted space dominated by a pulsing mass of dark energy. And there, at the heart of the maelstrom, stood Kravox, the ancient Vortak artifact clutched in his clawed hands. The warlord was chanting in a guttural tongue, the artifact's power surging through his body, warping his flesh into a monstrous form. "You're too late," Kravox bellowed, his voice distorted by the dark energy. "The artifact's power is mine." Murloc stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Not if I have anything to say about it." She reached out with her mind, her psychic powers clashing against Kravox's own. The chamber shook with the force of their mental duel, the artifact's energy crackling and swirling around them. Kevin and the others surged forward, engaging the remaining Vortak warriors in a desperate battle. Plasma fire and energy blades clashed, the air thick with the stench of ozone and blood. But even as they fought, Kevin could sense Murloc's strength waning, Kravox's malevolent power threatening to overwhelm her. With a roar of defiance, he pushed through the melee, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached Murloc's side, just as Kravox loomed over her, the artifact pulsing with malignant power. Without hesitation, Kevin reached out, his mind joining with Murloc's, their psychic bond flaring to life like a supernova. Together they pushed back against Kravox, their combined will a lance of pure energy. The warlord staggered, his grip on the artifact faltering. With a final, desperate surge, Kevin and Murloc shattered the artifact, its dark power dissipating in a blinding flash. Kravox howled in agony, his monstrous form crumbling to dust. Around them, the Vortak warriors fell, their strength fading with the artifact's destruction. In the sudden stillness, Kevin and Murloc stood amidst the ruins, their chests heaving with exertion. They looked at each other, a profound realization dawning in their eyes. Their love, once a simple bond between two hearts, had become something far greater. It was a force that could shape the very fabric of the universe, a power that could light the way through even the darkest of times. Hand in hand, they turned to face the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together they would build a new galaxy, one where love and unity could flourish, and where the horrors of the past would be but a distant memory. Triumphant and weary, Kevin and Murloc returned to Earth, the shards of the shattered artifact secured in a Xanthian containment field. As their ship descended through the atmosphere, they were greeted by cheering crowds and a hero's welcome, the people of Earth celebrating the end of the Vortak threat. In the days that followed, as the Allied leaders convened to discuss the future of the galaxy, Kevin and Murloc stole precious moments together, planning their long-awaited wedding. They pored over guest lists and seating arrangements, debating the merits of traditional Lemnorian cuisine versus Xanthian delicacies. But their domestic bliss was short-lived. A mere week after their return, a massive spacecraft appeared in Earth's orbit, its crystalline hull glinting in the sunlight. The vessel, a sleek and angular construction unlike anything the Allies had ever seen, broadcast a message on all frequencies. "Greetings, people of the galaxy," a melodic voice intoned. "We are the Kelnorians, and we come in peace. We have watched your struggles against the Vortak with great interest, and we are impressed by your unity and strength. We invite you to join us aboard our vessel, the Kelnoria, for a grand summit to discuss the future of our shared galaxy." Kevin and Murloc exchanged a glance, their wedding plans momentarily forgotten. This was an opportunity they couldn't pass up, a chance to forge new alliances and shape the course of galactic history. And so, along with representatives from the Lemnorian Empire, the Xanthian Confederation, and a dozen other allied species, Kevin and Murloc boarded a shuttle and ascended to the Kelnoria. As they stepped aboard the massive vessel, they were struck by its sheer size and grandeur. The interior was a vast open space, its walls a shimmering mosaic of crystalline panels that pulsed with a soft inner light. They were greeted by the Kelnorians themselves, a tall and ethereal species, with luminous skin and eyes that sparkled with ancient wisdom. The Kelnorian leader, A statuesque figure named Zor-El welcomed them with open arms. "Friends," Zor-El said, her voice a melodic chime. "We have brought you here because we believe that you are the future of this galaxy. Your courage and unity in the face of the Vortak threat have shown us that you are ready to take your place among the great civilizations of the cosmos." She gestured to a massive holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber. "We offer you a gift, a token of our friendship and respect. Our technology, our knowledge, all that we have learned in our eons of existence, we will share with you." The assembled representatives murmured in excitement, the prospect of access to Kelnorian technology a tantalizing one. But Zor-El raised a slender hand, her expression growing serious. "But this gift comes with a condition," she said, her gaze settling on Kevin and Murloc. "You two have proven yourselves as warriors and leaders, but to truly unite the galaxy, you must be more. You must be symbols, paragons of virtue and strength." She waved a hand, and the holographic display shifted, showing a series of alien worlds, each more bizarre and forbidding than the last. "You must undertake a series of trials, tests of your physical, mental, and emotional fortitude. Only by passing these trials will you prove yourselves worthy of leading the galaxy into a new era of peace and prosperity." Kevin and Murloc looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. They had faced countless challenges together, had stared down death and emerged victorious. These trials, whatever they might be, were just one more obstacle to overcome. "We accept," Kevin said, his voice firm with resolve. "For the future of the galaxy, we will face these trials and emerge stronger than ever." And so, with the fate of billions resting on their shoulders, Kevin and Murloc stepped into the holographic display, ready to face whatever challenges the Kelnorians had in store for them. The first trial took place on the scorched surface of Zarthox, a planet of endless deserts and searing heat. Kevin and Murloc, their skins slick with sweat, navigated a treacherous maze of towering sand dunes and jagged rock formations, each step a test of their endurance and will. But the true challenge lay in the heart of the maze, where a series of fiendish traps and puzzles awaited them. They dodged spinning blades and leapt over pits of bubbling acid, their reflexes and instincts pushed to the limit. At the center of the maze, they found themselves in a vast arena, the sand stained dark with the blood of countless warriors who had come before, and there, waiting for them, was a creature out of nightmare, a monstrous fusion of flesh and metal, its eyes burning with a fiendish intelligence. "Behold the Zarthoxian behemoth," Zor-El's voice echoed from above. "A construct of our own design, a test of your martial prowess and strategic thinking." Kevin and Murloc exchanged a grim look, their weapons already in hand. They had faced worse than this, had stared down the Vortak, and emerged victorious. This creature, no matter how fearsome, was just one more obstacle to overcome. They moved as one, their weapons flashing in the harsh sunlight. The behemoth roared, its claws slashing and its tail lashing, but Kevin and Murloc were relentless. They danced around the creature's blows, striking at its weak points with precision and speed. It was a battle that pushed them to their limits, a test of their strength and their bond. But in the end, they emerged victorious, the behemoth lying broken and still at their feet. "Well done," Zor-El said, her voice filled with approval. "You have passed the first trial, but there are more challenges ahead, each more difficult than the last." Hands so battered but unbroken, Kevin and Murloc stepped into the holographic portal, ready to face the next trial. The icy caverns of Krelnor awaited them, a world of eternal winter and frozen darkness. As they stepped out onto the planet's surface, the cold hit them like a physical blow. The wind howled and screeched, driving shards of ice into their exposed skin. But Kevin and Murloc pressed on, their armor's heating systems struggling to keep them warm. They came at Kevin and Murloc in waves, their claws and fangs tearing at their armor. But the two warriors fought back with a savage determination, their blades and plasma fire cutting through the beast's ranks. Deeper and deeper they delved, the cold seeping into their bones. the creatures growing more numerous and more fierce. But Kevin and Murlock's bond sustained them, their love and trust in each other, a fire that no cold could extinguish. At last, they reached the heart of the caverns, a vast chamber where the ice formed intricate patterns and delicate sculptures. And there, waiting for them, was the final challenge of Krelnor. A creature of pure psychic energy, a being of thought and will given form. It assaulted their minds with visions of their deepest fears, their darkest secrets. It sought to tear them apart from the inside, to break their bond and their spirits. But Kevin and Murlock's love was stronger than any fear, more powerful than any doubt. They joined their minds, their psychic link flaring to life like a supernova. Together, they pushed back against the creature's onslaught, their combined will a lance of pure mental energy. The creature reeled back, its form flickering and fading, and with a final desperate surge, Kevin and Murlock shattered its hold, banishing it back into the depths of the astral plane. They collapsed to the icy floor, their minds and bodies exhausted, but they had passed the trial, had proven their mental and emotional fortitude. "Impressive," Zor-El's voice echoed through the chamber. "You have faced your fears and emerged stronger for it. You have but one trial left, the most challenging of all." Kevin and Murlock looked at each other, their eyes shining with love and determination. Whatever this final trial might be, they would face it together, as they had faced everything else. The holographic portal shimmered and pulsed, ready to take them to their final destination. Hand in hand, Kevin and Murlock stepped through, ready to face their destiny. The final trial took place not on a physical world, but in a realm of pure thought and emotion. Kevin and Murlock found themselves floating in a vast, featureless void, their bodies and minds disconnected from the physical universe. "This is the astral plane," Zor-El's voice echoed through the emptiness, "a realm where thought and feeling are given form, where the boundaries between minds blur and fade." Suddenly the void around them shifted and changed, colors and shapes swirling into existence. They found themselves standing in a familiar place, a place that tugged at their hearts and memories. It was Earth, but not the Earth they knew. The cities lay in ruins, the sky choked with ash and smoke, and everywhere the bodies of the dead, human and alien alike, littered the ground. "This is a vision of what could be," Zor-El said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "A future where the galaxy falls into chaos and war, where the hard-won peace you fought for is shattered." Kevin and Murlock looked at each other, their eyes wide with horror. They had sacrificed so much, had fought so hard to prevent this very future. But then the scene shifted again, and they found themselves standing on a battlefield, the ground slick with blood and ichor, and there, lying broken and still, were the bodies of their friends and allies, the ones they had fought beside and loved. Admiral Hawkins, his face a mask of pain and regret. Zakthar, his energy blade still clutched in his lifeless hand. Zeltor, his compound eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. And there at the center of it all was Zephyr, her body twisted and mangled, her once vibrant eyes dull and empty. Kevin and Murlock cried out in anguish, their hearts breaking at the sight of their fallen comrades. But even as they wept, the scene shifted once more, and they found themselves face to face with each other. But these were not the Kevin and Murlock they knew. These were twisted, corrupted versions of themselves, their eyes burning with hatred and malice. "You failed them," the false Kevin snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You led them to their deaths, and for what? A fleeting moment of glory, a hollow victory." "You're weak," the false Murlock hissed, her face a mask of contempt. "You couldn't save them, couldn't save anyone. You're nothing but a failure, a disgrace to your people and your love." Kevin and Murlock reeled back, their minds and hearts assaulted by the cruel words and the painful visions. But even as they struggled against the onslaught, they felt a flicker of doubt, a nagging fear that perhaps their doppelgangers were right. But then, in a moment of clarity, they looked at each other, their real selves, and saw the truth shining in each other's eyes. They had not failed, had not led their friends to their deaths. They had fought with honor and courage, had given everything they had to protect the galaxy and the ones they loved. And their love, the bond that had sustained them through countless trials and challenges, was not a weakness but a strength. It was the very thing that made them who they were, that gave them the power to face any obstacle and emerge victorious. With a surge of mental energy, Kevin and Murloc joined their minds once more, their psychic link blazing to life. They pushed back against the false visions, against the doubts and fears that sought to tear them apart. "Well done," Zor-El said, her voice filled with a deep, abiding respect. "You have passed the final trial, have proven yourselves worthy of the mantle of leadership." The void around them faded, and they found themselves back aboard the Kelenoria. The representatives of the allied species gathered around them, their faces alight with awe and admiration. "The trials you have faced were not mere tests of strength or skill," Zor-El said, her eyes shining with wisdom. "They were designed to forge you into something more, to unlock your true potential as leaders and guides for the galaxy." She gestured to the assembled representatives, her voice ringing with conviction. "The future of our galaxy lies not in conquest or domination, but in unity and understanding. And you, Kevin and Murloc, will be the ones to lead us into that future." Kevin and Murloc looked at each other, their hearts swelling with a deep, unshakable love. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, had proven that their bond was a force that could shape the very fabric of the universe. And as they stepped forward to accept the mantle of leadership, they knew that they were ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. Together, they would build a new galaxy, a place of peace and harmony, where all species could thrive and prosper. The Selnorians, their purpose fulfilled, bid farewell to the Allied representatives and vanished into the depths of space, their crystalline ship fading into the stars like a half-remembered dream. But the impact of their visit would be felt for generations to come. The technology and knowledge they had shared would transform the galaxy, ushering in a new era of discovery and progress. And at the center of it all, guiding the galaxy into the future, were Kevin and Murloc, the two warriors who had become so much more. The trials had... Upon their return to Earth, Kevin and Murloc wasted no time in sharing the knowledge and wisdom they had gained from the Kelnorians. They met with world leaders, scientists and philosophers, sowing the seeds of a new era of galactic cooperation and understanding. But their joy was short-lived. A distress call from the Lemnorian homeworld shattered their brief respite. On the view screen, a haggard Lemnorian officer, his uniform torn and bloodied, delivered the grim news. "Vortak loyalists have seized control of the capital," he gasped, his voice thin with pain and exhaustion. "They're being led by a powerful psychic named Zorkix. He's turned our own people against each other, a brutal civil war. We need help now, before it's too late." Kevin and Murloc exchanged a grim look. The spectre of the Vortak, it seemed, was not so easily banished. They gathered their most trusted allies, Admiral Hawkins, Zakthar and Zeltor, and set course for the Lemnorian homeworld, ready to face this new threat head-on. As their ship entered Lemnorian orbit, the scale of the crisis became clear. The once gleaming cities were in ruins, fires raging unchecked through the streets. The skies swarmed with fighter craft, Lemnorian against Lemnorian, in a brutal aerial ballet. The team landed in the midst of the chaos, the air thick with smoke and the stench of burning flesh. They pushed through the panicked crowds, plasma rifles at the ready, towards the heart of the city where Zorkix had made his stronghold. But as they fought their way deeper into the war-torn streets, they began to encounter a terrifying phenomenon. Lemnorians, their eyes glazed and their expressions twisted in unnatural rage, turned on the team with savage ferocity. It was clear that Zorkix was using his psychic powers to control the minds of the population, turning them into mindless pawns in his bid for power. Kevin and Murloc, their psychic bond stronger than ever, could feel the insidious touch of Zorkix's influence, a slimy, repulsive presence that made their skin crawl. They pushed forward, determined to put an end to this madness. As they neared the central control tower, the seat of Zorkix's power, they were met by a sight that chilled their blood. Rank upon rank of mind-controlled Lemnorians, armed to the teeth and ready to die for their new master, blocked their path. "Zorkix has taken control of the planet's ancient defense system," Murloc said, her eyes wide with horror. "Those psionic amplifiers, they were designed to protect the planet from psychic attack, but he's using them to project his influence, to control every Lemnorian on the planet." Kevin nodded grimly. "Then that's where we need to go. We have to shut down those amplifiers, break his hold over the people." They charged forward, weapons blazing, carving a path through the mind-controlled horde. The air crackled with psychic energy, the team's own mental defenses straining under the onslaught of Zorkix's power. They burst into the control room, a cavernous space dominated by pulsing, glowing machinery, and there, floating in the center of it all, was Zorkix himself. He was a nightmarish figure, his body a twisted fusion of Vortek and Lemnorian DNA. His eyes blazed with psychic fire, and his voice echoed through their minds like a thunderclap. "Welcome, heroes," he sneered, his lips curling in a mocking smile. "You're just in time to witness the birth of a new era, an era where the Vortak will rise again, stronger than ever before." Kevin and Murloc stepped forward, their weapons leveled at the abomination. "Not if we have anything to say about it," Kevin growled. The battle that followed was like nothing they had ever experienced. Zorkix was a master of psychic warfare, his mental blasts ripping at their minds, seeking to shatter their very sanity. But Kevin and Murloc's bond was stronger. They clung to each other, their love a shining beacon in the darkness of Zorkix's madness. They pushed back against his psychic onslaught, pouring every ounce of their strength and will into the fight. Around them, the fabric of reality began to fray and distort, the physical world buckling under the strain of the psychic duel. Machines exploded in showers of sparks, the floor cracked and heaved, and the very air seemed to shimmer and warp. But even as they struggled against Zorkix's overwhelming power, Kevin and Murloc knew that they could not win alone. They needed something more, a weapon that could turn the tide of this battle. And then, in a moment of blinding clarity, they saw it. The psychic energy of every sentient being in the galaxy, a vast, untapped reservoir of power. If they could just harness that energy, channel it through the conduit of their love. They reached out with their minds, casting their thoughts across the stars, touching the hearts and souls of billions. And to their amazement, they felt those minds reach back, a tidal wave of hope and courage and fierce, unyielding determination. In that moment, Kevin and Murloc ceased to be two separate beings. Their minds and souls merged, fusing into a single radiant entity of pure psychic energy. They were the avatar of the galaxy's hopes, the embodiment of its unbreakable will. With a roar of defiance, they unleashed that power, a blinding wave of psychic force that swept across the planet like a cleansing fire. It shattered Zorkix's control, breaking the chains of his madness, freeing the Lemnorian people from his grasp. So Zorkix screamed, his body convulsing as the psychic feedback tore through him. His power crumbled, his mind collapsing under the weight of his own twisted ambitions. And then it was over. Zorkix lay broken and defeated, his reign of terror at an end. Around the planet the fighting ceased as Lemnorians blinked and shook their heads, as if waking from a long and terrible nightmare. In the aftermath, as the Lemnorian homeworld began the slow process of rebuilding, Kevin and Murloc knew that their work was far from over. The galaxy was still rife with conflict and strife, still burdened by the scars of the Vortak War. But they had seen the power of unity, the strength that came from understanding and compassion, and they knew that they had a new mission, a sacred duty to spread that message to every corner of the galaxy. Hand in hand, forever changed by their experience, they set out into the stars, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were no longer just warriors or leaders, but something more. They were the ambassadors of a new era, the heralds of a future where all species could come together in harmony and peace. And through it all, their love would be their guiding light, the unbreakable bond that would see them through whatever trials the future might bring. The galaxy would never be the same, and Kevin and Murloc would be at the forefront of that change, their love a shining example of what could be achieved when hearts and minds worked as one. As Kevin and Murloc traveled from world to world, their message of unity and cooperation resonating across the galaxy, an unexpected visitor arrived at their ship's airlock. It was Zephyr, Murloc's long-lost sister, thought to have perished in the destruction of the Lemnorian flagship so long ago. But Zephyr was not as she once was. Her body, now a fusion of organic flesh and gleaming cybernetics, bore the marks of a harrowing journey. As the airlock hissed open and Zephyr stepped aboard, her eyes, one luminous blue and the other a glowing red optic, fixed on Kevin and Murloc with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. "Sister," Murloc breathed, her voice trembling with a mix of joy and trepidation. "How is this possible? We thought you were—" She stepped forward, her cybernetic limbs whirring softly. "But that's not why I'm here. I bring a warning, one that threatens everything you've fought for, everything you've built." Kevin and Murloc exchanged a glance, a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy shroud. "What do you mean?" Kevin asked, his hand unconsciously drifting towards his plasma pistol. Zephyr's gaze bore into them, her words laced with a grim certainty. "The Kelnorians, they're not what they seem. They're not the benevolent saviors they've led you to believe." She began to pace, her steps ringing on the metal deck. "They're energy beings, ancient and insatiable. They feed on psychic energy, the kind generated by conflict, by war, and they've been manipulating the species of this galaxy for eons to generate that energy." Murloc shook her head, disbelief etched on her features. "No, that can't be. They helped us, guided us, the trials—" "The trials were a sham," Zephyr cut in, her voice sharp. "A way for them to gauge the strength of your bond, to see how much psychic energy they could harvest from you." She turned to face them fully, her mismatched eyes blazing. "Don't you see? The Vortak, the Lemnorians, even the humans. We've all been pawns in their game. And now, with your bond being the strongest they've ever encountered, they're preparing to harvest your energy and ascend to a new level of existence." Kevin felt a cold dread settle in his gut, a sickening realization dawning. "Our love," he whispered. "They've been using it, manipulating it." Zephyr nodded grimly. "And they'll destroy the galaxy to get what they want." Murloc's fists clenched, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. "We have to stop them, we have to—" But her words trailed off as the true horror of their situation sank in. To stop the Kelnorians, they would have to sever their bond, sacrifice the love that had sustained them through so much. It was a choice that tore at their very souls, but one they knew they had to make. For the sake of the galaxy, for the countless lives they had sworn to protect, they would have to give up the very thing that made them whole. With heavy hearts and a grim resolve, Kevin and Murloc set course for the Kelnorian mothership, ready to confront the beings who had so cruelly used them, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. The Kelnorian mothership loomed before them, a vast shimmering construct that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. Its crystalline spires and pulsing energy conduits spoke of a technology far beyond anything Kevin or Murloc had ever encountered. As their ship docked with the massive vessel, an eerie stillness settled over them, a palpable sense of dread that seeped into their very bones. They knew that what awaited them within would test them like never before, would force them to confront the very essence of their bond and make a choice that would echo across the stars. With Zephyr at their side, her cybernetic enhancements humming with barely contained power, Kevin and Murloc stepped onto the mothership's gleaming deck. The air itself seemed to thrum with energy, a discordant vibration that set their teeth on edge. As they moved deeper into the ship, navigating its twisting alien corridors, they could feel the presence of the Kelnorians, a vast, overwhelming consciousness that pressed against their minds like a physical weight. And then, in a cavernous chamber that pulsed with an eerie amber light, they found themselves face to face with Zelvor, the leader of the Kelnorians. He was a being of pure energy, his form a constantly shifting maelstrom of light and power. Welcome, Zelvor said, his voice a resonant boom that filled the chamber. I have been expecting you. Zelvor seemed to swell, his energy field pulsing with a menacing intensity. Ah, yes, the truth. A slippery thing, is it not? You see only what your limited minds can comprehend. Murloc stepped forward, her fists clenched. We comprehend enough. You've used us, used our love for your own selfish ends, and now you seek to destroy everything we've fought for. The Kelnorian leader laughed, a sound like the crackling of 1,000 electrical storms. Destroy. No. Transform. Elevate. Your bond, your love. It is a power beyond your understanding. With it, we will ascend to a new plane of existence, become gods among the stars. Kevin shook his head, a grim smile on his lips. Not if we have anything to say about it. And with that, the battle began. Zelvor unleashed a storm of psychic energy, a maelstrom of raw power that threatened to engulf them. But Kevin and Murloc stood firm, their love, their unbreakable bond, forming a shield against the onslaught. They fought with everything they had, pouring their hearts and souls into each blast of psychic energy, each desperate defense. Zephyr joined the fray, her cybernetic weapons flaring to life, adding her strength to theirs. But Zelvor was powerful, a being honed by eons of feeding on the psychic energies of countless civilizations. He battered at their defenses, seeking to break through, to claim the power of their bond for himself. In that moment, Kevin and Murloc knew what they had to do. They looked at each other, a wealth of love and understanding passing between them in an instant. And then, with a final, agonizing wrench, they severed their bond, sacrificing their love to unleash a psychic blast of unimaginable power. The blast tore through Zelvor, shredding his energy form, scattering his essence to the cosmic winds. The Kelnorian mothership shuddered and convulsed, its power systems overloading, its structure breaking apart. And in the heart of that maelstrom, Kevin and Murloc clung to each other, their minds and souls torn asunder by the backlash of their sacrifice. They screamed in agony as their bond, the very foundation of their being, was ripped away, leaving them hollow, shattered shells of their former selves. As the mothership disintegrated around them, they barely managed to stumble to their ship, to flee the cataclysm they had unleashed, and as they watched the Kelnorian vessel collapse in on itself, a miniature supernova blooming in the void, they knew that their love, the very thing that had made them who they were, was gone forever. In the days and weeks that followed, as the galaxy reeled from the revelation of the Kelnorians' true nature, Kevin and Murloc drifted apart, mere shadows of the heroes they had once been. They went their separate ways, each trying to find a new purpose, a new reason to go on in a universe that seemed suddenly empty and cold. But even in their darkest moments, they held on to the memories of what they had shared, the love that had burned so brightly, so fiercely. They knew that their sacrifice had not been in vain, that the galaxy was safe from the Kelnorians' machinations. And so they endured, apart but forever connected by the echoes of a bond that had transcended space and time. They became legends, whispered names spoken with reverence and sorrow, a testament to the unbreakable power of love and the price of true heroism. The galaxy would never forget them, the saviors who had given everything for the sake of others, and though they were no longer the shining beacons of hope they had once been, their story, their love, would endure, a flame that would never be extinguished, a light in the darkness of an ever-changing universe. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I like the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.